Hello, everybody. This is Robjh1 coming to you with another broadcast with isolation. I think this is isolation either 10 or 11. It's one of those numbers. If you follow me on YouTube, you'll get the number right. I can't remember. So many things have been happening. And of course, I'm joined with my guest, Joshua. Joshua, how are you?
I'm good, Rob. And it's funny, I was thinking of the number 2. As you started saying it, I hadn't thought about it in a while. It's got to be 9 or 10. I don't think we've hit 11.
No, not yet. So what's been happening since we last spoke? I don't think we've spoken.
How long has it been? It was weekly for a while, and now it's been maybe a month.
Probably so. A lot has changed in the world.
It's not quite as isolated.
No, it's not.
And New York City is, it's picking up somewhat. You know, down here in the village, the restaurants are open. Maybe I talked about this before. Did I talk about how much litter there is in the streets now?
Yep. That was our last broadcast.
Yeah. So like the other day, you know, I pick up at least one piece a day. So the other day it was like 10 or 11 o'clock and it was time for me to go to sleep. And I was like, oh, I haven't been outside today. So I went outside and just walk around the block, maybe 15 pieces of trash. That's not like going out of my way. It's just like right there. And it's like people don't register. It's like they just think, here's what gets me. An 8-ounce water bottle. All right, I can see, at a stretch, I can see a liter water bottle. But they're these little 8-ounce bottles. I can't see them serving any actual purpose. But Washington Square Park is littered with them.
Right.
Someone's like, I'm the least bit thirsty, and I'll just go get some water. When I grew up, do you remember this? Bottled water was like something Europeans got, and it was like rich Europeans. I mean, there's Perrier, but even Evian was like upscale. And now I feel like our culture feels like that's normal, and it's an otherwise beautiful land and oceans that not so much anymore. Anyway, that's one of the top things on my mind.
And this is happening, you said, in the village. And for those listeners who are not familiar with the village, could you give them a description of the village? What is it about?
It's a very historic region. You know, a lot of people think of Manhattan by the grid pattern because, you know, you have avenues going north and south. You have the streets going east-west. In Greenwich Village, the streets are all on a weird diagonal, and they're not named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're named like Charles and Perry and Greenwich Avenue and things like that. So there's lots of little corners and nooks and crannies where you can get lost, and little parks like Abington Square, Abington Square. And it's got this very historic, a lot of the buildings go back to, there might be a few that go back to the 1700s, but definitely a bunch of 19th century buildings. And a lot of them have plaques on them where famous people lived and worked. Like down the block is where, what's his name? Jack Kerouac finished writing On the Road, and around lots of little things like that. And there's been historically it's been a lot of artists, musicians. There used to be tons of jazz clubs. There used to be tons of galleries, small little theaters. Now, as it's gotten more and more expensive, these brownstones are owned by, I guess, increasingly finance people. So it's getting less politically active. Also, back when Robert Moses was building highways all over the city, Greenwich Village is the one place where they were able to stop it. They were going to build a highway through what's now Soho, Greenwich Village, and Jane Jacobs it's a very well-known name for having played a big role in stopping that and protecting what are now these really vibrant areas of the city. It's where I've lived since a little over 20 years. I've lived in my place longer than almost anyone I know. My dad has lived in his house longer.
Okay.
And so there's still lots of little restaurants, and I like to go down to the river, and so there's a nice path along the river to jog on.
Right. And what does it make up of people, would you say? I mean, in the
time that I've been here, it's definitely gotten a lot richer and more bourgeois, more, I can't say it's gentrified because it wasn't exactly poor before.
Okay.
But it's more homogenous now than it was before. Although it's still very diverse. Oh man, I got to tell the story. When I lived in China for a year, I had this, you know, people think about, what's the word? Culture shock is something you get when you go to a new place, but actually culture shock tends to happen when you come back from a different place. So when I went to China, I knew it was going to be different. So I lived it was 8 months in Shanghai.
Okay.
I took the bullet train. My friend was like, you got to take their bullet train. It goes like, I don't know, 300 kilometers an hour, 250 miles an hour. And then you go to the Shanghai airport. It's very new. So you could like eat off the floor of this place. It's so clean. And everything's so new and vibrant there. And so then I get in the airplane and I get back and I land in Newark. And I remember the airport, there's like, the signs are terrible. There's like a corner of one of the rooms where the baggage claim room is just crumbling. And there's just signs around like danger. No sign of anyone fixing anything.
Right.
I take the train, New Jersey Transit to Path and Path into the city. So the New Jersey Transit train, the platform is crumbling and the train is creaking and it's going really slow. Yeah. And then I take the train into under the river, the Path train into Manhattan. And I'm thinking that train is like going really slow. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is third world. Yeah. We're being totally outclassed by China.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was not happy about that.
Right.
And then I get up out of the train in Manhattan, in Greenwich Village in particular. And it was amazing because there's like, as long as you're not hurting anyone, do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And so it's like just people walking around in crazy clothes and outfits and saxophones and stuff. And I'm thinking, this is just amazing. And so even though I've been up for like 30 hours because I can't sleep very well in airplanes, I say, I'm going to go for a run. And I go down to the river and it's just a beautiful day. And there's like cheerleaders practicing next to Orthodox Jews, next to some dudes playing jazz. And I'm like, it's just like, this is what, to me, I just love this vibrancy. You know, it's like, this is what this country to me is about. Just people doing what they want. And right. No one's bothering anyone. And do you know there's what's his name? The Dutch artist who was a landscape and became very abstract expressionist or abstract with the squares and just very bright colors. I'm blanking on his name. Mondrian. Mondrian, he has this one painting, Broadway Boogie Woogie, which takes all of his old stuff and throws this really jazzy New Yorky feel into it. And it just made me think of that beautiful work of art.
What year was this?
That to me is Greenwich Village.
What year was this?
2011, 2012.
Okay.
Almost 10 years ago.
Right. Would you say things have changed?
Oh yeah. How so? I mean, in 8-10 years, it's not huge change. I know that when I moved here, there were a lot more jazz clubs. Right. Now I don't know if Village Vanguard is there anymore. There's Smalls. There's Blue Note. But there used to be more. And like now, the other night I was walking along and there's a guy who plays cello sometimes. I don't know if he's doing it for money or if he's just doing it because he likes it. Actually, last night I was in Washington Square Park and there was a guy with an electric guitar and he was playing some pretty cool stuff. It sounded like Hendrix. And then this other band was playing. I guess they can't play inside anymore. And a crowd was forming and it was like punky kind of music that normally I wouldn't listen to, but outdoors it was brighter.
Right.
I was like, this is really good stuff.
Was it good stuff because you've been inside such a long time and now you're able to get outside?
Partly. Also because it was like, I like the initiative. I don't know I presume that if they're playing, amplified music, they must have gotten a permit, which meant they put some work into it, which probably meant someone else, there's probably some organization behind it. I'm not sure. Right. But it's not like a crowd was forming and the guy had to sing with a mask on and it was like the singer was white, the bassist and the drummer were black. And the audience formed, which is people coming up and there's like one dude like headbanging and skateboarders are stopping and just watching. And, you know, I like that diversity. It was, I don't know who they were. I applauded when they finished each song. Right. And it was very pleasant. It was, but on the other side, like the meatpacking district is just next to us. Right. When I first got here, the meatpacking district was already becoming gentrified. Because when I was living uptown by Columbia, before I moved down here, meatpacking district was meatpacking. It smelled horrible. Yep. And there were these grimy clubs that on Friday and Saturday nights, well into like, 3, 4, 5 in the morning was like, you had to know where you're going because there was like blood on the streets of like the meatpacking stuff.
Yep.
And then Sex and the City started making it more popular because they were kind of hanging around down there. And then now it's just overrun. Well, not now, but before the pandemic, it was just lots and lots of tourists and very expensive upscale stuff like Soho House and
Yeah.
the Gansevoort Hotel. When that came, it was like a big deal. But then now that's like, don't, that's like regular
afterthought.
Yeah. So, but then the High Line I'm up and down about because it was just gritty. There was a long time ago, when there's manufacturing in the city, trains came and brought stuff into the city.
Right.
Then how long ago? I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years ago was the last freight train that came through. And then there's this overhead train line that was, I don't know, I guess it was kind of dangerous because it could fall, I guess, but it was built to last. It was definitely going to last a century or so. And they were going to take it down. And then for some crazy reason, the community as well as some celebrities got involved. And somehow it got turned into a park. And the park is this really wonderful, just like art around here and there, but it's really crowded. But for someone who lives here, sometimes when I go to Midtown, I'll go out of my way to go over to that park, go up the stairs, and then walk along. But I can go down to the river and walk along there, or just walk up 6th Avenue or 7th Avenue.
Right.
So that kind of illustrates it. It's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It took community to build it. People come from around the world, and I think it's a big tourist site for people to visit.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of not, it wasn't, how to put it? I think things used to be more grassroots, and this is more constructed. They're now doing this pier out on the Hudson. They're redoing
that looks great. Yeah.
It looks great. Yeah, I'm mixed on it because it looks like it's gonna be really fun because it goes up and down. It's got all these levels and it's got this weird kind of styling.
Pods.
Yeah. On the other hand, what's wrong with just grass? I would have been just fine if they just had grass.
Well, they're putting grass on it. Grass, and I think they're going to have a.
Yeah, and this other stuff. Like I can't criticize it.
Just go with the flow.
Yeah, I think of you sometimes. Like, who did this? Whose decision was it? It's kind of. I think it came from like what's his name? Barry Diller?
Yeah, Barry Diller. He's been working on that project for quite some time now, and now it's finally coming to fruition. I was shocked when I was bike riding one day and I saw it coming up. I'm like, wow, this is going to be great. Because I had been reading about it. It was supposed to be on a larger scale and have a lot of other little things on it, restaurants, but then they, said, no, can't do it environmentally, this, that. So it was taken off the grid, and now it's back up. And, I think it's going to be completed by 2021, I think. So they're saying.
It looks pretty close. And I see them working on it.
Yep. So that's
there's
really
the
good.
pier, and then also the space near the pier. It's like they're putting benches and stuff. So it's going to be, again, I would have preferred a little more grass, but it's
grass will be there.
Yeah, it's manicured. It's. I think there's less of a sense of community and more sense. Okay. There's some things that like people want to turn Pier 40, which is now a big parking lot, into. There's a few playing fields there, and people really want to turn it into a tourist destination of some sort. And people who live here are like, what about us? Like,
right.
That the money that whoever, say they make some roller coasters there or something like that, that money's not going to stay in Greenwich Village. Mm-hmm. Greenwich Village has plenty of money.
Right.
But it's not going to build more community here for kids. On the flip side, the farmers markets. I love the farmers markets, Abington Square and Union Square.
You see, so you have something that you like, then they'll bring in something for the tourists and for the people that are visiting the area. And I think personally, given all this taking place, we need all of the innovation and creativity to bring jobs to the city and keep the city moving. Because right now, with the entire shutdown and things partially open, where's the revenue? Where are the tax revenues? We can't, get to full capacity with the monies that we need to be sent to New York or DC without people staring about, buying things, sightseeing, and participating fully in the economy. Uh, we started this by talking about isolation back in March, I think it was, and now we're partly open, certain parts, certain companies, businesses are open, but then others aren't open. And when I walk around the city and I see the restaurants that are closed, that are boarded up, I never viewed restaurants most the way most people looked at them. I didn't have to go like die to go to a restaurant on a Friday night with friends or Saturday night or after work. You know, it wasn't my forte. But now that I see these places closed, it bothers me, and I'm concerned about my fellow, you know, Americans who aren't able to go to work. And I find myself now patronizing some of these restaurants, although I might not eat the food, I'll give it to someone else. But the fact that these businesses are closed, and then to hear stories, these little small restaurants that you pass, I guess you take for granted, you didn't even think about them. And when you hear the stories that, you know, a person took their life savings to start the restaurant because they wanted to do their own thing, they were barely making it, breaking even, but not enough to, you know, just enough to live, but they were happy. And now these restaurants are closed, some of them indefinitely. There's a restaurant in the Lower Manhattan Financial District that was called Paris. And I'd lived in Lower Manhattan for like probably 20 plus years, never frequented the place. And I say about 15 years ago, some friends of mine said, hey, let's go there. And they know how I am about restaurants. I'm like, okay, I'll go. It was a really nice restaurant. It had been there since like 18 something. It's closed now. I'm like, are you serious? It's like, yeah, it closed. The guy couldn't, you know, people weren't coming by and the rent is expensive. So, you know, he had to close. And there are a lot of other stories that are like that. So when I hear of people opening up businesses or doing things to attract people, at one point I was kind of indifferent, but now I'm like, okay, more power, because we need this now more than ever to keep the economy going, to keep things moving. Because if it doesn't, I mean, the city, go back to like the 70s when it was, you know, about to crash. And I think it was President Ford who said, let it crash. It's New York City because it's a big liberal place. So
Yeah,
I
Ford
could
to
care
City,
less, you
drop
know.
dead.
So I hope it doesn't get back to that. But as we started out saying when we opened this, that things have changed greatly since January, beginning of January, you know, the new year, 2020, high hopes and dreams, and people, this is going to be my year, this, that. And now I hear people saying, I'm not going to even count 2020. You know, I'm just going to just mark it off my calendar because of what we're going through with this virus, this pandemic that we never thought in a million years. Well, at least I didn't, because I was always told that, you know, there would never be a hurricane in New York City, and there wasn't, but the results of a hurricane in 2013 that flooded a lot of Lower Manhattan and other places, no one ever expected that. No one ever expected the, I think it was the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, and then 9/11, and then the hurricanes. And now a pandemic of this size. We always thought there was another country or someone else in someone else's country. We've heard about it, read about it, you know, in history, the Bible and whatnot, but not now, not in my lifetime, but it is in my lifetime and it's happening now. So it begs the question, what else is going to happen? What's next?
Yeah, you know, to talk about food is I'm on multiple sides on food, because when I go to the farm, after we hang up, I'm gonna head to the farmer's market. Not many people buying from farmers markets.
Why?
And if they're, because they don't know how to cook, because
Mm-hmm.
they perceive it as more expensive. And when you buy the stuff in season, it's like, it's the most tasty and cheapest. And so I look at a nation that's something like 80% overweight and obese. And now I'll grant some people have medical conditions, some people like it, that's their business. But I know how many diet books get sold in this country. And that tells me that some people don't want that to be the case. And they don't know how to get out of it. And a lot of, I basically stopped eating at restaurants because they only serve doof, which is my word, food backward, for stuff where salt, sugar, fat is the main thing. And I defy you to find a restaurant in New York City that is not mainly serving doof. And I'm happy to eat at one that doesn't, that's reasonably priced, but I don't think they exist.
Right.
And meanwhile, well, you know how I love my cooking. So every restaurant, it's not like people are buying, well, I guess at the restaurants, they are buying more food, but they're not buying from farms. Mm-hmm. And so I would have no problem with the United States where people ate much more meals at home. Home cooked food is healthier. It's more economical. It brings people together. And so I'm kind of torn on this restaurant business because I certainly do appreciate the craft that people put into it. And these are small businesses, but if it's not adding value or it's making people, if it's unhealthy, you know, I do tell you, I have great confidence in the entrepreneurship of this nation, of humans, that if those storefronts, if those restaurants close and rents go down, new businesses will emerge. I'm pretty sure about that. And yes, it's painful. I don't want to take, I mean, I'm feeling the pain. I'm sure that economically speaking, and I'm sure that's nothing compared to what many others are experiencing. But, and I also don't want to compare the economy to what it could have been had the world been unchanged. Mm-hmm. We have to compare it to what it would be now that the world has changed. That comparison is not quite so bleak. I mean, I mean, I don't want to, it's tough to talk about counterfactuals of like what it would be otherwise.
Right.
But we have a virus. That's the world. And that's going to have an effect. I mean, you have to say, what are we going to do given the situation as it is, not how we thought it would be in 2019.
Mm-hmm. That's unfortunate.
And so, yeah, I mean, we don't want things like this to happen. Okay. They have happened.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, why? I think back to some of the broadcasts, the tapings that we had done previously, when we were in isolation, and I was saying that I was always looking on the outside wondering, is there a party going on out there somewhere? Yeah. And they're not telling me about it? Is something else happening? Well, now that I think about it, there were other things taking place that I was completely unaware of. I don't know what it was, but now that we've come out of hiding, so to speak, and we're staring about and we're looking around and we're looking at people, I don't like what I see. I don't like what I see at all. And I can't say what's in front of us because I don't know. Because
so
things keep
like
changing.
What you see?
I don't like just the state of affairs of the country. There's a lot that's taken place since this whole pandemic was brought up on us. You have, when we spoke about this before, George Floyd, we have protests, we have riots, we have people pointing fingers at other people, we have Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. We have the Karens have been created. We've got to have conversations, but the way the conversations or the lack of conversations are taking place, I don't like it because everyone is shouting. I think you said this in one of your posts, no one is listening.
Yeah.
We're talking over each other.
9 words that define 2020. Everybody's talking and no one's listening. Everyone wants to be heard and no one wants to hear the others.
And the most important thing about a conversation is listening. And at one point in my life, I had a very difficult time listening because I felt that what I was saying had to be said and I wanted other people to listen.
That sounds familiar to me.
Right, but, but I think when we stop and listen to what the other person is saying, you'll be surprised at what you're hearing. Because oftentimes or not, you're probably saying the same thing. It's just coming across differently. Or you can learn from what the other person is saying. And once they've said it, you've had a chance, then you can talk over them all you want to. But you got to give them a chance. And I think that's what's happening now. I think a lot of rhetoric is out there. and, no one's listening. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm interrupting someone saying how important it is to listen.
Yes.
I had an amazing conversation with a guy, and it reminded me of our conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the names Matthew Stevenson or Derek Black? Is it Derek? Derek Black? They made the news a while ago. I think his name is Derek Black, and he was raised. He was like the godson of David Duke, and he was raised to be a white supremacist. He helped make as a child, helped create the Stormfront webpage,
mm-hmm.
Which is like a big white nationalist page.
Mm-hmm.
He years ago, I don't know, something like 10 years ago, he goes to college, I think, and there he meets this guy Matthew, an Orthodox Jew, who starts inviting him to his Friday Shabbat dinners, and they become friends. And after a while, Derek, if I get the name right, he disavows. How you're raised is not your choice, right? You're a kid.
Right. It's Derek Black.
And he disavows that. Derek
Yep.
Black. And they, so they're on like the Daily Show and all these different places. I forget exactly where. I heard them, I think on Being, the podcast, Krista Tippett's podcast. And as it turns out, Matthew went to my business. He went to Columbia Business School, as did I. So I could look him up in the alumni database and like contact him. And we did an episode on my podcast. And he shared the story of how they met, and why he happened to invite him to these dinners, and how people were like, if you do this, I'm not going to come to your dinner. And then gradually, they're still friends. It's a really, what you're talking about. It began with people listening. He took big risks. I mean, both of them took risks on all sides. Everyone, and emerged from that friendship. So definitely check out that episode. And there's plenty of other stuff about them online.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at it now.
It was really. I should have just told you about it right away, because it's actually with us it's you would be more on the conservative side. I would be more on the liberal side. But then on the conservative side, there would be white supremacy, which I don't see you being a member of.
Right.
So
no, I don't remember.
We crisscross in odd ways.
But I don't. That's interesting that you would say that, because I don't see conservatives as being, not all conservatives, and I would say a majority of white supremacists would go into the voting booth and vote liberal or Democrat.
Could be. I'm thinking David Duke was Republican, so I'm being fast and loose with Republican, conservative, which are not the same thing. Right, left, so I was being very loose with how I was saying things, and so. But that illustrates, and my point being, the divides aren't so clear.
Right.
But talking across them, I feel, and listening across them it's effective. Yeah. In actually, for people, I think that his inviting the guy to dinner, and he set a rule: no one's talking politics, no one's talking about white supremacy. So that was a ground rule. So they could only talk about music and whatever, stuff, life. And then it was a year and a half later that things started really changing within people. Right. And had he instead organized a march, I think he probably would have increased the polarization, not changed anyone. I think it was more effective. And maybe there's a place for marches, maybe there's a place for lots of different things, but certainly this worked. Yep. And I suspect this one guy, Matthew, probably influenced more people through cooking dinner than had he done many of what is the main thing now. Like, I don't know what, there's a lot of marches, and I can't quite tell what would happen. What would happen if they would say, okay, we're done marching, and then let's say there is a clear thing, or a set of clear things that would happen that would say, okay, now we don't have to march anymore. I don't see how the marches are creating something. I can't take away from, sometimes people want to vent. Sometimes people want to express emotion. Right. I'm not sure where it's going.
Well, 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 a couple of things I would say. Uh, we have the right to protest, march, and do whatever you want to do. I think this all started
Well, not the
after,
looting. I mean,
well, not the looting, peacefully, within the
yeah.
Constitution. Of course, not looting, but this all started, so they say, from George Floyd. One thing led to the next. You have people, oh, well, let's try this, let's try that. It's an organized movement, I think. George Floyd was just was the I guess the starting point that people were trying to use to start this. Because if you were to ask people who are out there now, why are you doing this and what started it, they would be oblivious. Some of them probably don't even know who George Floyd is. I remember when I had interviewed this one young lady about the whole movement at City Hall Park, and I was asking her, and she was clueless. Other than what someone told me this, and this is why I'm doing this, but having a passionate about it herself, she didn't know. And I think now at this stage of the game, the whole thing was, we want fair and equal treatment. What happened to, well, it started out with we're mad as to what happened to this guy, this black man who was killed. Okay. Then it morphed into Black Lives Matter. Then it morphed into rights. You're not listening to us. Then it morphed into defund the police. And then it just kept morphing and morphing and morphing. Then all these people coming together, and they all have a different view as to, or a different initiative ground game. Because within this group that I was speaking to at City Hall Park, had people there, people were for trans rights, another person for, the rights to school or what have you, just a lot of different groups there with what they want to happen. And within that, I remember one guy saying, well, if you go over here, these people are going to tell you that we're here because of this, but we're not really here because of that. I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting. So I think the message got lost within the hype, the emotions and the feelings, and wow, we have all these people that are out here that are standing here and they're saying this, and we're coming together, but it's like, what is the message? What do you want? You said defund the police, and they're saying now they're going to defund it. Why are you still there? Now what do you want? What else is there? Oh, well, we'll figure it out. Well, let's tear down all the statues. That's the next thing. Okay, so let's tear down the statues. Okay, now what? Okay, well, let's write Black Lives Matter on all the streets. Okay, we're going to put that on some of the streets. Now what? So it's like, we're going to make this up as we go along, and it's by design to do that so that you can't hold, so I've been hearing, anyone accountable, which was the same thing happened with Occupy Wall Street. They seemingly didn't have a main person to go to say, hey, tell these people to knock it off, fold it up, go home, so that no one can be held liable, one particular group that is. So it's like these different little groups that are functioning within or up under the umbrella of this is the movement we want.
Did I tell you about my friend who was involved with that movement?
No. Which movement?
Occupy Wall Street.
No.
And so this was, when was it? This was like 10 years, 5 years ago? It was, anyway, there's a guy, I haven't kept in touch with him, but I was meeting with this guy periodically, he's just friends. And a couple times he was like, hey, I can't make it, there's this stuff going on. And then Occupy Wall Street started getting the news. And I started noticing that when the times he was canceling on me were when things were happening. And I said, are you involved with that? And he goes, yeah. And I say, and so this is post-business school, because I'm seeing it as a big leadership opportunity. There could be something really happening there. And I said, oh, if you're involved with it so early, maybe you're in a leadership position to really help things happen. And he goes, no leadership. That's not how this works yet. This is not what we're doing. And I was like, I don't think this is going to work. And I don't think it worked. It seemed like something could happen, and it's very complex, but I suspect that something about what he said there was a big piece of it.
Right, because if you have a leadership, if there's one person you can go to, you can probably hold that person or that group responsible for the bad things that take place. So it's like, no, all little groups, we're all doing our own little thing, and the message gets diluted, and people go up on a little tangent with what they want to do. So back to what I was saying, from looking at this as a Black man, looking at planning Black Lives Matter on the streets, and people, oh, wow, this makes me feel good. It doesn't make me feel good. The Black Lives Matter, yeah, it's a nice little catchy phrase. Oh, yeah, Black, oh, right, yeah. But when you stop at the end of the day and think about it, Black Lives Matter, what exactly does that mean? Do I need people in the streets shouting that Black Lives Matter, other than me knowing that my life matter? No, I get it. I know what they're, what they're angling, but it makes no sense, especially if you want to sit back and you want to say that my ancestors built this country. My ancestors did this. So your ancestors built it. So now you want to tear it down? What does that leave you? What?
I've never heard it said quite so. You started to laugh. It was
And
pretty funny.
it's when you think about it, it's like, okay, so your ancestors built it. You want to go around telling people, but you have heard of that. My ancestors built this country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm asking.
Me? Yeah.
Yes. You've heard of that. You've heard Black people say, my ancestors built this country.
Yes.
Whenever there's an argument, it's like, well, my ancestors built this country. And okay, granted, fine. So why now are you, the descendants, tearing down the country? And not just tearing down the statues, but tearing down other parts of the country, burning it up, because a few bad cops, you have a few bad businessmen, a few bad teachers, a few bad everything, firemen, no matter where you go. But because of that, and again, I think people get caught up in the emotions and not thinking through what's being said and what's happening. So when I go out and I look at the state of affairs in New York City, then I look at it across the country and what's happening. And I was asking you a while ago as to the makeup of Greenwich Village, and you went into describing it. I was more so looking for who are the people, what category of people, because if you say that, you see bottles and trash thrown about, these people, okay, lots of tourists.
Not so many tourists now.
Yeah. But not so many tourists, but that neighborhood itself is not a neighborhood complete with conservatives. New York City is not a conservative.
I wouldn't say that.
Right. So the
probably
people,
more than you think, but it was heavily Hillary voting.
Right, but more than you think. But I guess the point that I'm trying to get at is that this trash that's there is probably liberal trash. People who consider.
Themselves. I mean.
So that
that litter that transcends all.
Absolutely, because you told me when you were, when you're saying with your mom and your stepdad, you saw a lot of Trump supporter signs, but still there was garbage and.
Yeah, and I also just drove up to. I spent a weekend in Vermont. Oh, it was awesome. Do you know the Spartan race? I got
the who?
By Joe DeSena, the founder, to go spend a weekend up there. Joe DeSena. The founder of the Spartan race. So people know Tough Mudder, Spartan race.
Yep, I saw that on your blog. Yes.
The whole way, litter, the whole side of the road. It was just, these are just highways in through New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont.
Why do people litter? I don't get it. If there's a trash can, and I've seen this, there's a trash can right by a person, they're drinking a soda or water or eating, and the trash can is like, they could touch it. But yet it's like, oh, I'll just put it on the ground, I'll just throw it away. Let someone else pick it up. The same thing in the subways. Now, the subways have been the cleanest that they've ever been since when I last left about almost a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago when I left New York. It was clean, the subways. Now, I don't know what the condition is now, but even on the subways, people will eat and okay, I'll just toss it.
Yeah,
what does it deal with litter? People pick up your freaking garbage. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I don't think, certainly for me, I feel the pain of people on the other end of it.
On the other end of what? Garbage?
Oh yeah, I saw this movie, The Story of Plastic, and it shows, since China stopped accepting our plastic or our garbage, then people in the Philippines and Indonesia and Southeast Asia were like, all right, we'll take it, with zero infrastructure to handle anything. Yep. So people's homes and the shorelines are just, I was prepared to see stuff I didn't want to see, and I was not prepared for what I saw. It was just on a level way beyond what I expected. There's something you said that made me think of something though. Yes, I was
wait, before you say that, but that was another group they were embedded in Black Lives Matter, people concerned about the environment, wanted to change that. So again, you just had a modge of people all together with grievances and just all over the place, but go ahead.
I've seen very little environmental with them. You know when a march has gone through because there's stuff on it, because I would love just to get this message out. Anyone protesting, leave it cleaner than you found it. It's just, there's no way that it benefits you to leave a mess.
Yeah.
Leave it cleaner than you found it. But I don't know how to get that message out. and it's not going to hurt. It's not going to stop anything. Like
no,
whatever your message is, just pick up whatever, don't bring anything to litter and take stuff when you leave.
Here's a message. Pick up your shit and go home. Okay, when I was at City Hall Park, I saw the garbage, the graffiti all over the place, and I kept wondering, who's going to clean this stuff up? Now, I think last week, they came in and they cleaned it up, and weren't the people who created the mess that cleaned it up. Okay, so...
yeah, there's this big disaffection between people feel like I pay my taxes, someone should clean up. There's a lot of different reasons why people litter. But I was listening to Joe Rogan. Who was the guest? It was, I think, a military guy. Maybe it was Jocko. Maybe it was someone in Jocko. Anyway, they were talking about how difficult it must be to be a cop right now. Can you imagine if you wanted to be a cop? Like, are you thinking maybe not to be a cop? So they said, I don't know if they were serious or joking, but they said they should do more, what do they call it? Drive arounds, ride-alongs. And I'd never heard of something like this before. And they said they were suggesting that cops go and find in your crime-ridden neighborhoods, find kids and have the kids drive around with them, and just the cops can meet the kids. So I walked down to the 10th, the precinct down here, which is, it's not the 10th, 6th, anyway, it's on 10th Street. So I walked down there, and I'm thinking, I'd like to ride along with the cops. I don't know what it would be like. Long time ago, when I was a grad student in physics, there was one of the postdocs on my experiment, he'd been an auxiliary cop, I believe just for the experience. And I thought I should do this. And certainly my experience at West Point was transformative. So I get there and I talk to there's a guy out front, and they got kind of barriers in front of it. Not serious barriers, but like barriers, small barriers, those metal grating things. And I go to the guy and I say, I was just listening to this podcast, and they talked about ride-alongs. I have no idea if you guys do this sort of thing, but if you do, I'm game. And he's like, I don't think we do anything like that. And I go, well, can I go inside and talk to, I don't know, a decision maker or something? He said, well, we have every month, before the pandemic, every month, there would be a community thing where the cops speak to whoever comes. And he said, I'm not sure if we're doing these things now during the pandemic. He said they're announced on Twitter. So I now, there was one like a month before I went there, and I didn't know to go there then. I had heard of these things before and never went to one. And now I've put on my calendar, check every month to see if there's one coming up, because I haven't seen one since. But I definitely want to go, and if I'll ask them, can I participate? Can I just observe in some way? I mean, I certainly know that my experience on jury duty, even the time when I had 30 days and I was an alternate and it completely wrecked my life, I love what I learned from jury duty.
That just reminded me that I have grand jury duty coming up.
Oh, enjoy it.
I'm gonna try to get out of it.
I really like the experience of meeting people, and they're weird and they're different. I don't mean weird in a negative way. They're like very different worlds. It's like this one case that I was on when I was the alternate, and my vote didn't even count on this one, just because they had to have, I think, like 14 or 15 people. And people were voting. I'm like, are you crazy? That's not what the law said. That is not, that's not my interpretation at all. But the rule is a jury of your peers. Right. And that's where I learned that the purpose, as a kid growing up, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And I thought the purpose was to find the truth, but that's not the point. We know that the truth is what happened in the past. Memories fade. People have different biases, and the goal is to resolve a conflict. And I really like that experience. And so going on with the cops, I think I would enjoy. I mentioned that to a friend. He was like, don't bring an ID. And like, he was like, be prepared for like them to assault you or something. I was like, that could happen. It didn't happen. But I think there's opportunity for is that the same thing as like inviting a white supremacist to dinner? I don't know. But it feels to me I don't know if it would make any difference in the world or not. Right. Certainly, I think if you want to change a system, people who have successfully changed systems, you got to start. It's this weird thing. You got to start with yourself, even though one person is just one person. Right. I've been studying W. Edwards Deming lately. who's this guy in the business world. Can I give you a bit of history about him?
Yep.
I like him partly because he got I believe a PhD in physics, but then he went out and his first work was working with the census in the 30s. At the time, they thought the best thing to do is to count every single person, send people out and talk to everyone. Right. And he showed, partly from his mentor, that actually, if you sample, you can get lower uncertainty, because everything you do, there's error involved. And then World War II breaks out, and the nation has to transform its factories from making whatever it used to make to making bombers and tanks and things. And he goes in and transforms that process, helps win the war in like a huge way, in a sort of way that like cracking the code of Enigma, it's not like on the front lines in the battle, but it certainly helps when you know what the Germans are saying to each other.
Yep.
And it certainly helps when you can make all your equipment faster and cheaper and higher quality, which is like most engineers thought that's not possible. Okay, the war ends and everyone goes back to the way it was. And they're just like, they think that higher quality means higher cost or slower process. Somehow he's connected with, I think, MacArthur, ends up in Japan. Japan at the time was, totally devastated. We think we have devastation here. We did not have Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and
not yet.
Let's go there at one point. And so he goes there and he says, they are like, we got to transform our industries. And the world knew Japan as low quality, cheap junk.
Yeah.
And they adopted his principles. And he said, if you adopt these principles as you're doing now, in 5 years, you will come to, I forget the word, like dominate the world in terms of economics. Within 4 years, many nations were putting up protectionist tariffs to protect themselves, because Japanese quality and the quality was high, the price was low, the turnaround was fast. And he got awards from the emperor. There's the Deming Award in Japan, which is one of the highest awards. I mean, now it's been many, many years, because that was in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Actually, in the 80s, finally, NBC did a show called If Japan Can, Why Can't We? And at this time, Deming was 80 years old, 70, 80 years old, living in DC. No, 70, I don't know. He's old. And the show comes on, and he starts getting all these calls. All these companies in the United States that never talked to him, never shunned him, and didn't really figure out how's Japan doing so well.
Right.
They contacted him, and they're like, what are you doing? Like Ford hired him, and boom, Taurus appears, #1 selling car in America. And it was direct result from his stuff. So
Demings, W. Edwards Demings. Okay.
W. Edwards Deming. And so I'm in the middle of this books, and I've just been talking to people who do the Deming Institute, and I have them on my podcast. And I learned about him in operations and statistics in business school.
Right.
To me, to have a transformation of an economy of a nation in 4 years of happy, it brought prosperity, high quality, low price, fast turnaround. And he had a strong, he worked with, the dignity of the worker was very important, but the change had to come through management. It was really very different than most people expected.
Right.
And very effective. So to change a system, you need personal change. And that's something, it's funny because you think one person doesn't make a difference, but on the other hand, you need it. And when I can't say it as well as he did, nor with his authority, because he transformed Japan and then did a big deal in the United States as well. Full head of steam on Josh right now, right? Very enthusiastic about a big role model for me.
Well, we're coming up on the time that we've got to cut off. There's a lot more that I'm sure that we can discuss and that we will discuss. So I would say to our listeners and viewers to tune in as we're back on track with having these discussions, isolation. I don't know if we're going to continue to call it isolation. Maybe we should call it the coming out or the opening up or the rebirthing. I don't know, but we'll pick a title and a name, and we'll go from there. So thank you for tuning in. Join us next time, and we will pick this back up.